Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I call to order this special meeting of the River Falls Board of Education. It has been properly notified. Do we have any visitors or delegations who would like to address the board this evening? If you would come forward, and our camera is there, so if you could tell us your name and then come up for the name for the minute.
My name is Brenda Dirks.
Okay.
And I'm with the River Falls Swim Club. I'm the team admin for the organization. We're just here to kind of clear case and letting outside organizations back into use facilities. In July and August, we worked with the city to use the outdoor pool. We studied extensively the CDC guidelines, worked with the city to develop a rather extensive plan according to USA Swimming and Minnesota Swimming Guidelines, which are our parent organizations, as well as Pierce County, to come up with a plan that we felt was going to keep our staff and our swimmers as safe as physically possible and still allow them to get back into their sport. October, November, we did the same with the school district. We were able to get back into the pool for a few weeks. With our plan, we just kind of a brief overview. It's 3-4 pages long. I think some of you have probably seen it prior. We mandate masks at all times. We have them line up in the hallway. We take their temperature. We make sure they're feeling well before we allow them to come in. This is all done at a distance. In the hall, once they get into the pool, everybody has a chair spread out around the pool deck, keeping them distanced again. They keep that mask on until they get into the water. In the water, everybody's distanced out. We're very, very reduced in capacity the past couple times we've been in the water. So keeping them distant, been super easy. We've had 8 kids in that pool. So super easy to keep them far apart. We've been grateful to have even that capacity. We reduced practice times and whatnot to try and get as many kids back in as possible, but we're able to keep them distant. After each practice, we go through and we sanitize everything that's touched before we bring in our next group of swimmers. Locker room usage, very minimal right now. We've got a couple kids that we do allow to go in afterwards. I've got X's on the floor. You go there, you don't go anywhere else, you don't touch anybody. Keeping them distanced and making sure that they're behaving appropriately while they're using those facilities. Our swimmers and our parents have been fantastic. We've had a number that have come into the close contact. They've done that thing. They've let us know they've done their 2 weeks of in the water with us, staying excluded to keep everybody safe in our sport. Families have been phenomenal with that. No gripes, no complaints. Just happy to have their kids back in their sport. That pool's super big, like I said, right? It's a very spread out area. We can put those kids in lanes and keep them nice and distant, even drill practice. Me personally, I've been a part of this team for 16 years. I've been the team admin for about 5 years. Had a lot of conversations with families and swimmers about how it's been helpful with depression. It's been helpful when kids are mean in school, because that happens. It's been helpful just having friends when they're not comfortable making friends elsewhere. We have our own little family in there that's welcoming to everybody. So to not have that has been really hard on the kids, as I'm sure you know, and that's why I'm considering everything so importantly, it's that emotional well-being. As a side note, we held a fundraiser over the past several months. It culminated in November. We had prizes that they were able to get afterwards, and we couldn't gather to give them those prizes. So we had kind of a drive-by getting their prizes, and those kids were so excited just for the couple minutes that they could come and see their coach and get their stuff and interact for just that few minutes. So it's hard to see them not in the water and in their sport of choice, when even for that fraction of a time, they're just so excited. I'm extremely proud of our team and what we've been able to do to keep everybody as safe as possible. I know our parents have been super appreciative of it. We fully intend, when the time comes that we're allowed to be back in the water, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to go above and beyond all the standards because we don't want to put anybody at risk. And we're also looking out for that emotional well-being of our swimmers. So that's what I have to say, and I just respectfully ask your consideration for us to be back into the pool again.
Brenda, thank you for your comments. The way that it works for public comment is that you are able to talk with us, but we can't give much of a response. But I do want to thank you for your measured, careful comments, for the fact that you are able to tell us how supportive your families have been of this. That is great. And it sounds to me, at least, as if you're doing all you can to be careful. This issue is going to be something that we'll be considering, and I suspect that your comments will be well taken into account by this board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to address the board? All right, then we are going to move on to informational items. And the first one is the second in a series of presentations about the social and emotional support that we are providing for our students. And so we will be now looking at the elementary level. So I see elementary counselors here. So welcome and thank you. And the floor is yours. That would be really great. Yeah.
And I'm gonna move, don't be offended, if I can see better.
My name is Joe Ames. I'm new this year. I'm split between Westside Elementary, where I spend most of my time, and then the Montessori Elementary as well. But just to touch on a couple of things that we're doing at Westside. So to start the school year, we started off a 30-day social emotional learning plan, which included jam-packed lessons to really get the kids started off. Because at that point, they were out of school for almost half a year. So we really wanted to have a plan in place to get them started off on a good foot. We also came up with a COVID-19 frequently asked questions, a response guide, because there's a lot of concern from families and students about what to expect coming back to school. So that was just a resource we put together and shared with families at the beginning of the year. We also started the school year with doing some minute meetings, which our principal, Amy, the school counselor, and myself do with all the students. We just go around and ask them a series of 4 or 5 questions just to get to know the kids. For me, that was huge being new, just to get familiar with the students' faces, and it was really good to hear the students say how happy they were to be back in school. The Check and Connect program, which really helps students feel more welcome at school. I know Amy runs a couple of groups with some new students to get them acclimated with the school and with each other as well. Behavior goal check-ins, so those are students that have a particular difficult time that just need a little bit more care and coaching, where we do regular check-ins throughout the week and daily. The last one listed on there is mindfulness in the classroom. That's through a Calm Connect program that we just started kind of pushing a little bit more right before break. What that is a program with kind of a package program that can be used for the whole class to work on self-regulation strategies. It can be narrowed down to the individual level to help specific students with specific concerns that they have. So that's something that we're trying to get in all classrooms to help them become more regulated and ready to learn whatever situation comes up.
All right, and like Joe said, my name is Amy Everson. I'm the school counselor at Westside. So to continue, we have some social emotional through the counseling program specifically. This year, I have increased my guidance lessons, my classroom lessons for all K through 5 students to 8 more classes per year per grade. So went from a certain amount and increased to 8 more. It just really allows me to get into the classroom more. I'm able to kind of expand on some of the lessons that I have had in the past and just go a little bit deeper with those. So that's been really great. I had a new student small groups at the beginning of the year. We met outside for obvious reasons and just to kind of help those students just get connected to our school community. They're new to the district. I'm also meeting one-on-one counseling for students in need, obviously in person, but also through our virtual learning students. I am meeting with a few students online with them weekly. We also have weekly connection meetings with the K through 2 group, and then also the 3 through 5 virtual learning students. And that rotates each week, either myself, our school psychologist, our principal, and then also our media specialist. And so one of the adults per week is keeping that positive connection with those students that are on virtual learning platforms. Also, the classroom social emotional activities that we're continuing for the teachers led, as far as that is like morning meetings. They're continuing that distance morning meetings. You're seeing students very well spread out, but continuing that social emotional connection with each other, reviewing expectations for all school spaces. So we're kind of keeping that routine like they would have every school year. I also have I'm co-facilitating a book study for our staff, just to support our staff social emotional needs. It's called Onward, Cultivating Emotional Resilience in Educators. And we meet monthly, and this has been really great. Really a good support for our staff. And we have about 15 to 20 regular staff members that are joining. And so we're just doing different things to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves as we are tasked to take care of the kids too. And then lastly, our character education. We are building, we're continuing that building-wide assemblies. We have it virtual this year, which is kind of interesting. We're doing virtual assemblies, and so the students can watch in their classrooms and just still participate in that character education and just the routine and the excitement of continuing that. And then our character council is still meeting separate groups, making sure we're staying in our cohorts with monthly service activities of kindness, and then having those spirit days just to kind of keep up that excitement and fun of being in school. So that kind of wraps up our West Side activity.
Hi, I'm Karen Swanson. I am the new counselor at the Montessori school, and it's what a crazy year to change jobs. But I'm super happy there. It's been a joy. I want to expand a little bit on the 30-day plan that we were asked to put together. And what we ended up doing was 3 separate lessons, standalone lessons per week for the classroom teachers to implement in the classroom with their students. And those were also delivered to them at 3 different grade levels. So at the other elementary schools, it was K1 and then 2-3 and 4-5. And at Montessori, it's Children's House, Lower Elementary and Upper Elementary. So in total, we put together 54 lessons for the teachers. And these included things like book links, read aloud book links, video links, activity guides, worksheets.
COVID related.
Yep, a lot of COVID related expectations that we had of the students, problem solving lessons, conflict resolution skills, friendship skills, all of those great social emotional things were sort of bundled up and delivered to the teachers weekly. As for the Montessori, I have a little bit of a different schedule because we have a different schedule altogether. So I am in the classroom with each class every week for 45 minutes or 30 minutes for the kindergarten level children. And then I'm able to work with our virtual kids weekly for little mini lessons, mostly connecting with them each week for about 30 minutes. And I do that during their morning meeting connected time. In addition, I started doing a really fun connectedness opportunity with our big kids, with our upper elementary kids, in person and virtual. We do a giant Zoom once a month together so that they can see their pals and have some good conversation and play a little bit together online, and that's been really rewarding for them. We like they do, we do needs assessments at the beginning of the year. I'm going to do another one in January just to check in with our kids. And I do those monthly with our virtual kids. They don't always respond, and that's okay, but we're just looking for feedback. Boy, I have the same sort of situation with drop-ins, with regularly scheduled kiddos who need some extra support and coaching. And then I do have several virtual kids that I'm working with as well. And several virtual parents who are looking for a little extra support too. And that's been a very pleasant thing to work with parents, stress and anxiety, coping skills. And I've got a couple of lunch bunches that we meet a couple times a week, which is always fun, building some more social emotional skills. And then our character education project or program at the Montessori is really the Virtues Project, and some of you may be familiar with that. They started it about 5 years ago at the Montessori, and it's really a way to build positive school culture and empower the kids. And we do a lot of talking about social emotional vocabulary and skill building throughout the day, and it's really woven into the fabric of our school day. We have morning announcements where the kids are sort of giving affirmations to each other for the virtues that they see each other doing. It's in the classroom, it's on the playground, it's in the bathroom, it's full time. So we're really building some good vocabulary and skills. Our student council has been meeting, and we have almost every upper elementary school student wants to be in student council, which is really cool. So it's challenging and it's cool. And so we've been doing some gathering of things for the food shelf. Last month we gathered toothbrushes and toothpaste for Giving Tree. It wasn't for Giving Tree, but anyway, it doesn't matter. We collected a crazy amount of toothbrushes and toothpaste for River Falls. So that was really nice. I would kind of like to end with share a little video with you about of our kids that they put together a beautiful little Snapchat of how they can feel in charge of themselves and feel a little bit of power in this time that's really we can't do a whole lot. And so giving them some agency. So if you could do it.
At our PME, we have been talking about kindness and how just one act of kindness and thoughtfulness could change the world. Claire, Wiley, Maya, and Beta have written a beautiful poem full of ideas to help us make the world a better place. One seed can plant the garden, one heart can change the world. One match can spark a fire. One life can make a difference. You see, it's up to you. It may seem impossible, but it's not. One life can make another. The tree can start a chorus. One word think it's very random. Just one. Amazing impossible, but it's not. Wait and start a blizzard. One pebble and start a landslide. One step becomes a day. One nation can rule the world. The smallest voice can make a difference. You see, it's not. It may seem impossible, but it's not. One life can make a difference. You see, it's up to you.
I was just really proud of their ability to take the ideas that we talk about in class and move it forward. And so they're getting it, and they're finding that they do have some power to make some change, even when life is really tricky and hard. So.
And I think our kids are just so happy to be at school and to be around others, and they're so resilient with wearing a mask every day and, you know, all the expectations that we have on them, that we're all pretty impressed with our kids. So,
Any questions?
Great job. I really like what you changed this year in your schedule. Do you want to mention that real quick? I think that helps a lot.
Yep. So the lessons, the increase in my lessons, Chris, is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Yep.
Other back to back.
Another what?
Other back to back. Like the day after day.
Oh,
Back to
correct.
back.
Thank you. Yes. So the change also includes back-to-back lessons. So I might have like a third grade, like I had a third grade class today. I'll see them tomorrow again. And so that, you know, I went from 14 lessons a year to 22 for K through 5. So when you think of the math, like that's a lot of lessons to increase for one school year. But the point of seeing them back to back is really great because, for example, we were talking about growth mindset today, and I get to build on that the next day. So instead of seeing them a week and a half later on the same topic or even a different topic. So that part is really kind of neat, and it just really helps them to make more connections. And like Karen, what you were saying is just kind of, you know, pull it forward and really do more with that when I get to see them 2 days in a row. So, yeah.
A couple things. That's a big change to go from, what did you say, 14 to 22?
Yeah.
That's a significant.
For every grade. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
that's significant then for you in terms of planning and implementation. So thank you for that. It seemed like the right thing to do in a day
Yeah.
when we need so many things for kids.
It was a good year to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Karen, I want to pick up on one of the things that you said in terms of the support that you are offering to parents for their own anxiety and so forth. Is it their own anxiety about their own anxiety or about how they are dealing with their children, or how is this? Because I'm wondering if there would be some additional ways that we could provide opportunities for families through community education, if you're finding this to be a need.
Yeah, and I think that the big answer is really yes.
Okay.
Yes, all of that. I did offer a little evening thing, not a course, but a discussion forum about
Mhm.
anxiety earlier in the fall. And I think I'm gonna offer that again in February. And I had a lot of people interested, but only one parent showed for that. And it was a Zoom opportunity. We were still kind of getting into the flow of the school year. But yeah, I think parents are anxious, kids are anxious, parents are wondering, what do I do with these kids when they come home? And they are clearly not sort of themselves. And so, so, you know, talking some parenting strategies, talking some self-regulation strategies, both for the parents and for the kids, because as adults, we're all struggling too. So, that answer your question?
I did.
It
It's something I hadn't thought about until I've thought about it, but not until it was not connected to your presentation. So that's an opportunity for us, I
It would be really
think.
beneficial to offer that again.
Mhm.
So,
This, I really appreciate hearing what you're doing and your concern and the work that you're doing. And one of my concerns always is in the students who aren't always obvious that aren't getting attention because they, and you maybe heard me talk about it before, I've talked about these board meetings before. The students who really need a lot of help tend to be fairly obvious. And kind of the high flyers with a lot of parent involvement tend to get a lot of attention because they're there. I often worry about those students who in the middle, they're compliant, they're not getting any problems, but there are more issues there, but they just aren't as obvious. So sometimes they aren't quite getting the attention that maybe we wish that they would, the encouragement and that sort of thing. So some of the things you're doing here, I think, help get at that, and I like that. I'm interested in, there's a question in here somewhere, so I'll get to it. I'm interested in your thoughts about what we're seeing this year in social and emotional effects on this, and you've talked a little bit about it, and just like things with the swim club and the connections, and you've talked a lot about that physical togetherness means so much to them. There's a lot of anxiety this year, or in fact, I was looking at watching that great video, thinking that if there's one thing that we take, one word that we take from this virus, this coronavirus, I hope it's not pandemic. I hope it's kindness, because we hear it so much. And if nothing else, if this doesn't instill that in these kids and our teachers and all of us coming out of this, maybe this isn't quite as bad, but where I'm going with this then is the question I'm thinking is what you're doing with this. Let's fast forward 12 months and you're in front of the board and you're talking to us about, here are the biggest challenges we're dealing with as a legacy of the pandemic last year that we're trying to make up for. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot and what it is right now and have you give me an answer, but I'm interested in your thoughts, and I'll be interested in your thoughts 12 months from now, because I think that's where our success will be measured, because there are a lot of deficits that will come from this. We will never be the same again. We will not teach the same. We will not do anything the same at the end of our sentence. But there's going to be lots of deficits. And just wondering if you could speculate on what you're seeing now, what you're hearing now, and what that might mean for you a year from now as professionals in the classroom.
That's a big question. It's a really big question. You know, I don't know if I can pinpoint things other than, you know, some of the behavior that we see, and with, I think for every kid that is sort of explosive and having a big struggle that's really obvious, there's at least one kid that's withdrawing and going the opposite direction. And so trying to meet all of those needs, I spend a lot of time talking to kids, you know, you have a choice in how you act and how you react to things, and control and can't control what you can and can't control. And I can't control what my friend here is going to do to me, but I can control how I react to him. And so teaching those big life skills, which I'm sure was done before, but boy, we are really, really pushing those hard.
And that one, especially with the pandemic, what we can and can't control is the lesson for all of us, right? Like as adults, as children, to make sure that we, you know, are recognizing that we don't have a lot of control right now, you know, and just really focusing on the things we can. But then also, I think one of the big lessons I'm noticing is gratitude, that our kids are really, and adults are picking up on what you are thankful for, and they are voicing that. I'm thankful I get to come to school. I'm thankful I get to see my friends at recess. You know, things like that, where they might not be able to do the 10 other things that they normally do, but they do get to do these 5 things. So we're trying to focus on those positives too, to really, and hopefully those are the lessons that continue on a year from now, is that, you know, yeah, remember back then, that wasn't fun, but now we get to do all of these wonderful things again and just really focus on the positives there. So I'm hoping.
So how much of an increase have you seen in terms of these really challenging behaviors for our kids?
I would say it's about the same, but I would say the kids that were kind of on the fence before, that had some underlying, social emotional needs, with this big stress has kind of maybe tipped them a little bit over. So they're not big and explosive, but they do have they're drawing inward, or they're acting out periodically, or they have just, they have anxiety, but it's not explosive. So I'm seeing more of that than the really extreme kinds of things.
I would agree. And just to give you an example, I heard a student, or maybe someone told us to me that I heard a student in class say, I bet you I would be really good friends with that person, but because they're, split in cohorts, they can't spend as much time and can't interact with that student during playtime as much as they would like. They haven't been able to maybe explore that possible friendship. So I think kind of expanding on what Amy said was kind of going inward and not being able to have all those social interactions that they would in a typical year.
We see that a lot with the kids who want to be with the other cohort, and they can't, and they're sort of stuck playing on that one area of the playground for the day, and they can't be with their buddies, and so there's that, and that fuels some of that.
They have no break from their classroom, small cohorts, and so then that causes some other, conflict, whereas they have 7 or 8 other children that they're choosing to play or not play with, and they don't have that whole grade level to choose from.
They're tired of each other in that cohort group. It was great to have Christmas or the holiday break because they all needed a break from each other, and now we're transitioning back.
So there's just different challenges this year,
Sure.
things that we didn't really think about before, and now that it just comes up to the surface a little bit more, but.
We're comfortable that all 4 elementary schools get an opportunity to connect with each other and help each other with the lessons and support each other.
Yes, absolutely. Thank goodness.
Yes. I worry when caretaking responsibilities or positions pick up, I worry about who's taking care of the caretakers, right? And the peer group and that interaction, I think, is super important. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, we're very grateful that we have each other.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Thank you for your work. This is foundational, I would say, in order for us to be able to do all of the other things that a school district is responsible for. I imagine that sometimes it must feel a little bit like people don't see what you do. And it was very good for us to be able to have a clear insight. Thank you very much. And please keep us posted about how things are.
Thank you very much for having
Thanks
us.
for coming.
Thank you.
All right, learning update and learning environment updates.
Our traditional Monday slideshow here. I added something a little different on the front page, and I'm not going to elaborate about this. I gave the school board a copy. There's a link for those at home if you wanted to look at this link. Some new guidance from the, I believe the correct name would be Harvard Institute. Several universities kind of joined together, Harvard and Brown University, others that have been providing some guidance along the way. This information is connected to, it's linked on, I know on the Pierce County website. And really just to point out again, there's evidence that supports the view that student, staff, and educator risk can all be brought to acceptable acceptably minimal levels, and that, of course, is if it's done correctly. So as we've all gone through these past several months, not even as much from March to get to where we are today, but just from this school year, things that have been learned as more students then are back in school. This particular report provides some worthy reading for you. We had our presentation again tonight on our social emotional supports. Update from the St. Croix County website. Good news there is we do see a little bit of a decrease. The trend line is headed at least in the right direction. I always add the disclaimer that the numbers are high, and I don't ever want to be perceived as minimizing where this entire COVID pandemic is at in our nation or our state. We have to remain very vigilant in all of our approaches, sure. Pierce County's website, again, where we were at when you look back in that November timeframe, seeing the overall direction headed in the other direction, obviously, is some good news. Public Health Now is saying that they are able to contact all newly identified cases. That's a good thing. And then they've added this on the website. Vaccinations have begun in our region. Our positivity rates, again, that's cumulative. Fairly new slide we've added just to take a look at 12 districts in our region. Again, I wanted to point out, as always, that this is a geographic region. It's not a school district statistic. It's a boundary of each of these school districts. And so we've been tracking that now here 4 different weeks, that trend line. This is our segue slide that really gets us to this one that outlines for you our current numbers. And for me, preferably, this next one gives you a kind of all in one place 11-week summary of where we're at. You can see that some of our numbers are down, as you would suspect. We're going to have, for example, fewer close contacts considering the break that we just had. Obviously, the goal here is let's keep the trend line down and let's not have a bounce back from holiday gatherings and so on. So time will tell on that.
Can I ask a quick question about that? It occurred to me that there could be, does that include phone calls or anything that we would have been notified of today? Or was there a period of time in the break where we weren't necessarily notified just because the school had a break? Or would we expect that 31 to go to 80 all of a sudden, after today, if the phone starts ringing again?
It's a fair question. I think that, there was some intermittent delays with some people taking some well-earned vacation time.
Yeah, for sure.
Either at the county level or locally. But I think we feel pretty confident that today we did get some updates and that these numbers are accurate.
Okay.
I'm hoping that we're not going to see a big jump tomorrow.
Okay.
It should be pretty accurate.
That's good to know. I guess I just wasn't sure. I wouldn't have expected there to have been the same level of reporting over the last 2 weeks, just in terms of connection between offices and people in different buildings. But
testing probably didn't take place on the January 1st or the 25th of December.
We had
Yeah.
a few more cases that were added to our list today.
Okay.
So this is kind of the slide where we put it all together and summarize here in the blue kind of where we're at. So high school is still at home. We thought that we should wait one more week now in anticipation, trying to think ahead. We planned that out ahead of time, as you recall.
Mm-hmm.
If in the event there was kind of a spike with numbers coming back off of the holiday break. We thought to delay coming back into our hybrid for a week would be a good move, so we've done that. 7th and 8th grade is currently in their hybrid, K through 6. They're still 5 days a week, face-to-face in school. And then I have 3 new items on here. To begin youth and club sport use of facilities. We have that practice in place where they sign the liability form and they have to submit their COVID safety plan before we would agree to allow that use. New would be for our Phi Ed department to have some more aerobic type of activity in class. Obviously, some of those mitigation efforts need to remain in place: sanitization, physical distancing, masking, limit the amount of aerobic activity. And then to allow a third family member to be a spectator at our home athletic events. We currently are allowing 2. So 3 new things on here. I'm gonna just, if I can, I'll just finish up to go down here. These 3 other items are, A, is that we are going to continue our abbreviated quarantine period of 10 days. Originally that was a 14-day requirement, and then the CDC came out with some new guidelines. There was communication going back and forth between CDC, the state DHS, the county DHS, and they're saying, the preferred 14-day, obviously better safe than sorry, but yes, those 10-day, 7-day new guidelines are appropriate for us to follow. The notation here below, we must continue to provide parent education and district reporting of symptoms. And so the parent education piece and the district reporting are both related to within the 14-day period. If you have any symptoms, you need to abide by the 14-day rule and not assume that this 10-day, 7-day thing just automatically, even though you have symptoms, that it's okay for you to come back. So that's the emphasis that I wanted to highlight here, that we need to do our part to help the county and the state to educate parents about that issue. And then we as a district obviously need to do our part in monitoring symptoms of those that maybe do return within that 10-day window. And so that we're not pushing that too fast and too furious.
Can you mention the 4K piece of that being different?
Yes, thanks. 5 years old and younger remains at the 14-day. B, continue to monitor COVID numbers and maintain interest in coming back 5 days a week. Really wanted to just put that out there that we all have an interest in seeing the day when we're going to bring back our 7th through 12th grade 5 days a week. We're not ready to move on that right now. We need to observe the numbers now that we came off of this holiday break, and we need to monitor and see whether or not we feel comfortable. And if we think it's smart and wise for us to do that, it's going to be a week by week process as it has been. We're not there, but I wanted to just say it out loud again tonight. That, yeah, we have an interest in this, but we're not quite there yet. And then the last one, C, the possibility of allowing visiting teen family members to attend. That is, again, for future conversation. It comes down to space. It comes down to physical distancing. And we think that there's space in that gymnasium where there's, I believe, a girls' basketball game to be held tonight. With our limited numbers of spectators for our home parents, that there's ample space for us to consider that moving forward. So we're not there yet, but I wanted to kind of plant that seed and also put that on your radar and get some feedback from you on all of this. So we are going ahead with these 3 here unless the board tells us otherwise.
A couple comments. One is, I agree with it. First off, I think you've planned this well. You've done this thoughtfully and cautiously, and you've got all the caveats in place. So if things aren't going well, you can deal with it. One of the things I'm interested in, I saw one of the items you had up there was Pierce County is now tracking the number of vaccinations. And I'm assuming that's the number of vaccinations that have been administered within the county, not received within the county, because I'm not sure they could monitor.
That's correct,
the number
yeah.
received.
Yeah.
And how is information getting out about this? I mean, we're not in Minnesota where all of our media comes from right now. How do our teachers know where they are? How do our citizens know, the community, where our students are? How is that information going to come out?
The county has a lot of that communication piece for us on that. Dave, I think you had more conversation with Karen, our school nurse, than I did on that particular topic today. Share with us what you and Karen talked about today.
So Karen is in close contact with Pierce County regarding who's in line, school district employees in that first wave of vaccination. It's all health aid related, our sort of healthcare workers, those are the only ones.
EMTs, first responders, as well as when you think of a hospital or clinic.
So for us, that's the school nurse, that's the health aides. There's also some specialized positions that OTPT, they would be the first school district employees that would have access to the vaccine. And then we're working, obviously Pierce County Superintendent is great. So we're working with Pierce County to try to make sure that when that information becomes available for our employees, that we do a really good job of communicating this. But right now, there's nothing to communicate because Pierce County hasn't shared that with us. We'll advocate strongly to get that information to our staff when there's information to give, but there isn't information right now.
So the first staff members for us will be our health line professionals, and then OT and PT. Really, for now, that's all we know. We've all heard seen the national reports regarding some delays in the vaccines, and whether people want to point fingers or find blame. My understanding of some of that comes down to there's a lot of things that have interrupted this process of rolling out the vaccines, from nationwide snowstorms to causing transportation problems, obviously, to facilities that actually do the administering of the vaccine. We can give a local hospital a truckload, a semi-load of vaccine. They have limited number of staff to administer vaccines. And so apparently for now, it's still being done on those individual cases. Whether the day will get here when you can go to your local Walgreens and walk in like you can for a flu shot, obviously they need to find ways to ramp up the administration of the vaccines that are available. That's really a big part of the delay that's going on right now, from my understanding.
Then the second wave comes where you have to have the second shot. So we're all pretty much in the first wave right now, but people have to go.
But the other part of that, and I think, so what I'm hearing is that we've got, and I assume we would be having infrastructure here in the district to help our district employees know if they're queued up and ready to get the shot, and we're going to help them get the shot as soon as possible. Second part of this is our parents, grandparents, other caregivers for our students right now trying to figure out, where am I on the list? And I have no idea how we're going to find that out in Pierce County. So we've got parents wanting to know, I've got a health condition, am I going to be able to get it?
Pierce County shared a graphic on Facebook. So the state of Wisconsin, the way I understand it, is categorized into there's 1A, 1B, 1C, and then there's like a 2 and a 3 designation is the way I've seen it. And I know I saw a grid that had Pierce County's logo over the top of it that was effectively what's been passed on. I've seen it through the Wisconsin Bankers Association, but Pierce County had what was effectively that same graphic that was shared over social media within the last week or two. I know I've seen it.
So even if I calculate it, where am I gonna get it? How am I gonna get it? Do I call and ask permission? Do they
Nobody,
ask
I don't
for
think
IDs?
anybody knows that yet,
Yeah, but-
unless you work in a hospital.
But that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying, that's the next phase that I think, as a district, because where I'm going with this is, as a school district, we may end up being one of the primary conduits for information about that, because I don't know how it's gonna get out in this community. I mean, people maybe can go look at Pierce County and try and figure out. I think the school district, probably in the city, maybe there's some other organizations around, are gonna be primary vehicles for getting out that information on where are you, how would you get it? Should I get mine at the clinic? Should I get it at Freeman's? Do I go to Walgreens, the hospital? What is all this? And I know it's not out there yet, but I think we ought to be prepared as a district to help disseminate that.
Yep, agreed. We're all anxious to learn more details, and hopefully now coming through the holidays with some more effort on our part too, to reach out and knock on doors and ask for some more information when it becomes available. It will certainly help to distribute information.
Found the graph that
We,
Todd's talking
not just as you're pointing out, Alan, not just to communicate with our own staff who are very anxious to know where they stand in the priority, but also to communicate with the broader community as well. Agreed.
Parents, caregivers, daycare providers, all of this, it's all connected to the school district. They all need to know.
So Jamie, you've asked for our feedback about this issue, and I will say, so the actions will be to continue where we are, as well as these new things that are in the blue. I am supportive of them. The things that I appreciate about our two, that I think you've done this in a very measured way that's incremental, that we're not just saying, okay, everybody, it's back to how it used to be, quote unquote. It is incremental. As far as C, you talked about that this was primarily a space issue. I think I would also like to add that in my estimation, it's a compliance issue as well as an enforcement issue. And I just hate that our people have to become COVID compliance police. Yeah. However, we have restricted it up to this point in order to protect safety and the interest of our athletes and coaches and community. We have to have great confidence that people are going to do it if we're inviting more people into our building.
Agreed.
So I would say that for me, when C becomes part of a blue recommendation, I'll be looking for those things.
I'm reminded of I'll use it as a segue to this last new slide. I referenced on the very first slide this new guidance that came out, and it was affirming to read some of the new guidance in the fact that they're basically saying that we are changing, this Harvard Institute, they are changing their tune on their guidance for schools specifically. And that's the report that I attached. It's specific to schools. And they're just transparently saying, look, we were all in panic mode when September 1 was coming in. We were contemplating whether to begin school or not, and what that would look like, and all the mitigation plans that had to be put in place, and so on. And so to be clear, the report doesn't say it's okay just to have a free-for-all, bring everybody back 5 days a week, tear off your mask, and get on with life. The only way that schools cannot become super spreaders is because of the many things that are in place. One of which is creating a culture of belief in the protocols that are in place and the need for compliance. And we got to ground that in trust with people, be transparent. And they, in turn, we all have to do this together and cooperate with each other to make this happen. And so whether it's here tonight with board decisions, parent compliance, all of our nursing and our health staff have been amazing. to look at the quarantine policies and the contact tracing policies and practices that we have in place in this school district matter. And that's what makes this work for kids to be in school and to keep our staff safe. And so I'm really just applauding people with this last slide, all of our staff, from our bus drivers and our kitchen staff to our teachers and support staff, front office secretaries, administration, nurses. It's all of the mitigation and all of the responses that we're taking that stops COVID from becoming a super spread environment here at school. So we cannot stop those approaches. We have to remain very vigilant in our approaches, even as we say, okay, we're gonna open things up a little bit more now. I was reflecting when putting these slides together. Remember back in March, we put caution tape around our playground equipment and said, you can't even go on the swings. We shut down, and COVID was nowhere near what it is in our nation today, and we shut down. We've gone from closing everything down to, as you point out, Stacy, incrementally making some things come back in the social emotional best interest, the academic, the physical best interest, but we're doing it incrementally because we're seeing that our mitigation efforts can work. They do work. And the last line of defense that we have, for our district is to be very, very, very vigilant in this piece. Our quarantine policies and our contact tracing. We just have to stay true to it. So we will try to continue to move the needle on some of these things. But we all know that push come to shove, we may need to shut things down because it's our last line of defense to stop the spread from continuing. We have a sport team today that needs to shut down for a while. We'll see if we can bring it back. But for now, we need to push the pause button. And we will continue to remain vigilant in all of our mitigation efforts, and it does take everybody to do that.
Todd?
I just was going to share a few thoughts too. Felt weird not having a meeting last Monday, but I just found myself reflecting on a few of these things. I think when the calendar turned, or when you saw the calendar starting to turn, it kind of hit me that, if these conversations are going to start about kids coming back 5 days a week at the upper levels, we probably need to start having those now, or gauging the temperature for what that looks like now, so that come February 1st or March 1st or whatever that timeline looks like, that we're not just starting a conversation too late, I guess is my biggest fear. So I'm happy to hear that there's been some talk of that, and I've expressed to Jamie that I don't know that I would say I'm ready to do that yet, but I'd like to know what that avenue looks like. What's the feasibility for the middle school kids who aren't there 5 days a week? What's the feasibility for the high school kids, and how do we do something like that? I'm supportive of everything that's laid out here. I don't necessarily need to make a change, but the three three spectators per athlete for whatever that sport would be. I'm just drawing in my own mind what that would look like if you add a fourth person to that group. I would still venture to guess, in all of the facilities that we have, the people in those groups are already part of either the same household or same cohort, and wouldn't be sitting, even with the increased number of people, they wouldn't be sitting any closer than any of us are, or any of the people who are here watching the meeting are, in terms of mixing with another group, assuming that we're able to limit meeting outside of the gym or the hockey arena or whatever it would be. So I would be open to that number being higher, more so than I would be the visiting, or certainly before I would be the visiting spectators, I guess is the way I'd say it. To me, if you had a family of 5 people or or 4 people and another family member who have been together, say as a grandparent, and they're sitting, I would guess, no less than 20 feet away from the next group of people in the gym. I don't see how that's any different than what we're all doing and have been doing for quite a long time. And so if there was one area to push further, I would say that would probably be the first one for me when I look at what's laid out here.
Even beyond, so you're saying beyond the proposed 3?
Yeah, I would be comfortable with that. I don't know what the exact number is, if there's a rationale for 3 instead of 4, or if it's just a step, here and there. But to me, jumping from 2 to 4 wouldn't be a whole lot worse. But I guess I would maybe defer to the people who have to do the enforcement with that too. So I'm just speaking in terms of if you sit and look at it, I've watched a lot of the basketball in the gym is probably the biggest facility. And I don't think there would be any reason that those 4 people sitting next to each other wouldn't have to get any closer than 2 people would be sitting next to 2 other people that are still 20 plus feet apart. So
It's also the coming and going too.
yeah.
But you make a good point though about the 4 people are probably in the same cohort anyway. They're probably in the same family, but yeah, I guess to me, that's probably the one I could go higher, but not necessarily, wouldn't have to today, but maybe we look at it next week.
Yep. I'm just, if we're putting our thoughts out there, that one for me is when I think about the logistics of, again, people interacting in a meeting versus 4 people who are already exposed to each other. I don't see there being a whole lot more risk. I've always felt the risk for the athletes in terms of the spectators is minimal at best, if at all, because almost all the sports, they would have little to no contact at all with any of those spectators. So
but I think what I heard you say was that you would give priority to increasing the number of our fans over letting this fans come. I think that's a good point. I think I could probably, if we were going to go in that direction, I would agree with that logic. There's another part though of the fans. I don't think it's that more fans might infect the students. I think the fans, the danger of infection is with fans. That's a community thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the athletes that are playing, that's a different group.
Mm-hmm.
I think the research has been pretty clear and pretty consistent about what's going on with the student athletes themselves. When we're talking about the fans, we're talking about a community thing and that kind of transmission. So I think it's a little different. I don't think that the fans are going to affect the students or vice versa.
I agree. Yep. Yeah, as long as we could keep people spaced out coming and going, that'd probably be the first one that I would point to say, there's, in my mind, there's more leeway, especially if I'm probably in most cases that I could think of or have heard of at least, you're talking about somebody from the same cohort. So the 4 of us sitting together were probably already exposed to each other regardless of attending the basketball game or not. So.
Jamie, are you planning on going with that third one with allowing 3 family members?
That's on for today for
Okay.
action.
Yep.
Yeah, could I piggyback on that?
Go ahead.
I totally agree too with those comments, but I would just appeal to, I think it's worth, somebody needs to actually do the math if we implement that. Because if you just sort of do a simple thinking exercise, the divorce rate is 50% in this country. And it doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to be in the same bubble.
Sure.
Now, I don't know what the distribution would be for the athletes' families and so on.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say it's going to be totally double the isolation points, if you will.
Yeah. Yep.
But I just think it's worth monitoring. Now, when you add the other team, now you're potentially doubling the number of isolation points that we have to accommodate in the auditorium or in the gym.
And I tend to think, I guess I'm prejudiced, but I tend to think our fans would be more compliant than visiting fans, but maybe I'm wrong.
I would like to think that. I don't know if I have data to support it.
I don't know. I guess I'm maybe swayed that way. But, so.
I hope so too, because I hope that
I
that's
hope-
part of the compact and that our athlete families have heard us say this, and
They
I'm
receive.
sure it's not 100%, but hopefully it encourages
I
compliance.
think the messages they receive from the school district is, this is, we're opening this up more, provided we're more careful and so on. So they know they've got a vested interest in making this.
I think
work.
that's the culture of the town or the district is probably maybe a bigger, I mean, if our parents are attending away events, which I think they've had the ability to do in some cases, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that ours had very good compliance based on the way that we've handled some of these things and what's been expected here. And my understanding is maybe that's not the case for some of the other teams and players. And I would guess that probably is kind of just the community feeling. I don't know which communities those are. I would sense it's probably more reflective of where that community and the district are across the board maybe. And, versus being home or away, I would probably expect that if our parents are attending an away event, they're still complying the same way they would if it was required here. But.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned not wanting to be the enforcer of this. Maybe it was you, Stacy. But I mean, you were, eloquent in talking about, Jamie, about how the mitigation measures we put in place and the parameters have served us well by and large. And when we have an issue, we lock it down as quickly as possible and so on. I think that will become critically important to continue. And as long as we can continue to do that, I guess we could consider having visiting fans. But I just think that's a tough thing to think about, how you enforce the continuation of those parameters we've taken so seriously.
I was the one who talked about that, and it was I regret that our people are having to do that, but I understand that it's important, and I appreciate their efforts.
I think building consequences in too for visiting fans is tougher, right? So the non-compliant, it's just harder to enforce. There's not longer term consequences of a team having to cancel their next couple games. It's different being a visiting fan, I think, than being a home fan. I'm really glad to see the aerobic PE activity on there. I think that's so important for our kids, so I'm excited about that. I'm a little bit concerned about the youth club sports and the facilities. Not because I'm necessarily opposed to youth and club sports playing, but I'm worried about the uniformity of the training of the coaches with the mitigation efforts, the buy-in of the different youth programs that are using the facilities, making sure that people are trained and accountable for those mitigation efforts. And maybe that's part of the COVID safety plan, but just, we have a really good built-in system with our high school teams, right? With Raleigh and with our coaches and the accountability of those folks and the training of those folks. So I'm a little bit worried about that. I'm also a little bit worried about if we're going to run into some capacity issues with some of the winter sports shifting. I know basketball is a half season. Girls play before Christmas, boys play after Christmas. But the girls are going to want to play after Christmas just like the boys are, because their whole season would have been eliminated with the facility. So you're doubling the number of teams looking to use those facilities. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, and doing that in an equitable manner right after Christmas that we haven't had to do. So, and gym space in this town is tight, I think, anyway. So those are my concerns.
No end to the worries that we can have. On your first point, I think that as far as club sports, that many, if not all of the things that you talk about in terms of coaching and training need to be part of their COVID safety plan. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean about compliance, but would there be additional issues to bring up there?
Only, I don't want to make it sound like we're going to show up with a clipboard and camouflage and spy on people, but I think that it's appropriate that we do a minimal effort at least to monitor and to go to and attend some of these facilities that are being used and spot check to make sure that there is compliance. There's one quick thought I have, I guess. We need to put our faith in people like Brenda, that they mean what they say, that they know how important it is to our kids. And they, as the adult, are going to do their part to see to it that compliance is upheld.
they too know the risk.
There's a
if
big
it's not-
level of trust going on here.
Yeah,
And
right.
that's,
Yeah.
like I said, we're not gonna go there with a clipboard and sneak around the corner and do a whole lot of that. We really, it comes down to the adult in the room doing the right thing.
I assume, just, and then I'll get to you, Ted, I assume that our club sports or youth activities would have the same parameters that our sports teams do. So if there's an outbreak, I mean, we can restrict access if that's necessary.
Definitely.
So, but Todd,
I just was going to speak from some of the personal experience that I have is, I don't know what drives it, but I think it piggybacks a little bit off of what the presentation talked about earlier, that I've observed the having something taken away from you and then the opportunity to do it again creates like a sense of gratitude for we are going to do whatever we need to. This has been taken away from us once or twice already in the last 9 months. We are going to go to whatever length and we're not going to allow somebody else to. I almost see it kind of going the opposite way where there's a higher standard because of what's happened, with a lot of those clubs. And it's all pretty limited experience that I have, but I would say I've seen it more the opposite, where if anything, it's probably, falls on the over restrictive in some cases, just to be safe with things. So I have faith that it would work out that way.
Well, let me be clear. I'm not anticipating that coaches and players are not gonna comply with it. What I'm saying is I think the mitigation efforts that we have in for our high school sports are really good, right? They're strong, they're wearing masks, the compliance is good. I really like where that is, and I just want to see that continue in our youth sports, and the ability to make a decision about an individual group if you need to is understood right on the front end. So I'm anticipating the same thing, Todd. But I just think being upfront about this is how we're going to use our facilities at a time when we have some health and safety concerns. Just being on the table with that, I would like to see us do that.
I think an example maybe of what you're saying, Cindy, is if we have a question about a game, some event, a school-sponsored event, Raleigh typically there's film of it or whatever, and Raleigh can go back in and look at it and see was that compliant or not, or we can check it out and ask around. We don't necessarily have that kind of same engagement and ability to check on these outside groups, so that might create some issues. I do agree though, because I think that what Jamie is saying is we're not going to play gotcha, but we're not going to turn a blind eye, right? So we're not going to be out there trying to get people to trip them up. We don't have the time for that, and it's not constructive at all. But by the same token, if we find it, we're going to have to deal with it. I think I like this, the direction we're going. I'm sensitive to what Todd's saying, and I think if we find we can open up more going forward, I think that's good. Because my greatest concern is I think the next 90 days are going to be tough. They're not going to be tough necessarily in increased infections, unless we have an extremely mild winter, which I'm not anticipating. I'm not a weather person. The next 90 days are going to be hard, and everybody's been dealing with the pandemic for 9 months, and everybody's getting owly. And the more we can help facilitate constructive and reasonable ways for people to connect and stay engaged in healthy sort of ways, the more likely we are to come out of this spring much healthier and in all aspects. So I think that there are some risks to doing some of this, but there are other risks, especially, and I'm hearing it and I'm seeing it with students just about every day right now, and I'm experiencing it with parents and all those kinds of things too. The other part of this, in addition to just sports, because again, here we go, we're having most of our conversation about sports. There's a group of people in this community that think we don't give enough attention to sports, but there's a whole bunch of people that think, oh, we talk about sports. And there's sometimes like tonight, I wonder that same thing. There are lots of other extracurricular activities this district does, and I would hope that we're encouraging and nudging those and supporting those as well. Because there's a whole bunch of kids in this district who just aren't into sports. They just aren't into sports. And what can we do to help as a district to help support and encourage them? because that's important too.
Yeah, like theater.
Theater, I don't know, robotics,
Concert,
there's just all these kinds of activities that we do. FFA,
You name it, yeah.
mock trial, forensics, the choir, the band stuff we've had in front of us to talk to. So.
I just was gonna ask one last question, maybe Jamie, in regard to the spectators, you know, the three, is that the next incremental step, or is that based on size, or was that just saying, let's do
Based
one?
on 3 is one more than 2.
Okay.
To be honest, I mean, it in part either with, you know, we already make exceptions as needed if there's more than 2 parents.
Okay.
Or guardians.
Yeah.
We're already do that. In part, the theory was either a grandparent or a sibling. Would it be nice to go to 4 as opposed to 3? Yes. Was I being maybe conservative and not putting 4 on the screen, but instead putting 3? I would say yes.
Okay, I guess that was my question, is there a consensus that we prefer to ultimately get to 4, or and I think that's kind of the standard that I've heard at a lot of other places too.
I think for me, hearing the conversation tonight, what I'll do is I'll work with Raleigh and go back to Mike's comment to literally be able to break down the dimensions of the swimming pool seating area, the gymnasium area, the specific bleacher seating for a wrestling match on down the line.
Yeah.
To be able to verify, are we comfortable to go to 4? Are we also then going to be comfortable to go with visiting spectators and let the math guide us beyond that? I was very comfortable without taking out the ruler and the tape measure to go to 3.
Okay.
There's just no doubt in my mind that we're going to have 20 feet distance is
Yeah.
going to be no problem.
You're probably right. With 3, you're already accounting for split families. So really, you could just implement a rule. You could go to 4 and say, as long as you're in the same bubble with somebody who's already coming, we can go to 4. And that's probably going to be the case 99% of the time.
Yeah.
We could amend this to say that the school board is empowering you to make the decision between 3 or 4
Yeah.
for our home team spectators. But I think at the same time, we've shown a bit of reservation about exactly how we would move on C in the future. Not that we're not going to, but that have some reservations.
Yeah, if we
that
need
make
an
sense?
amendment, I would allow up to 4. I just didn't know if I didn't want to do that, if there's not if there was a specific reason for ending up at 3, or if that was just, hey, that's only one step forward and maybe step 2 is further down the road. I'd be willing to do both of those. Right
Well,
away.
Todd, how about if you make the motion that we continue with the current learning environment, as well as the new adjustments that are in blue, providing administration the flexibility to mathematically decide between 3 and 4
Yep, I'll move
for
that.
home spectators. You'll move
So
that?
moved,
Thank
yep,
you.
yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
I have a question. Does that depend on the facility? So the facility I have in my head is the gym, right? I have no issue with that. Does that impact hockey differently? With the hockey arena, does it impact swimming with the pool differently? Are there facilities that we're talking about that are significantly smaller? And would that vary based on the facility, or would it be across?
What I heard in Todd's motion was that the administration has the authority to take out their tape measure and make sure that we're comfortable with the physical distancing if we go to 4. In other words, we might say yes in the gym, and we might say no in the swimming pool.
Okay, so it'd be facility specific too. Okay.
Hockey is I don't know, maybe David knows, maybe 6 rows of bleachers, but very linear.
Probably more than 6.
Okay, so say 8.
And then people normally stand around.
Yeah, and then you can stand around the board.
I've been in the hockey arena. That's not my question. I don't know how many people are on a hockey team, or I don't know any of that stuff. So
18.
if you say that it will work, I'll trust you.
The problem for all of these places is pitch holes, right?
Right.
Gathering area.
Yep.
I would like to provide a bit of feedback about B as well. And I always want us to be incremental, to be careful, to be confident that we have a pretty decent chance of having our plans work out. But I am intrigued with the possibility of in the near future thinking about more in-person learning. I'm particularly compelled by that when I hear from like Dalen, our student, talking about the unpredictability and the challenge of that with the hybrid learning environment for our secondary students.
Yeah.
And I imagine you might be able to make a few tweaks, but hybrid is always going to have unpredictability for adults and kids, which pushes me to want to imagine a time when we feel it could be safe enough to have more in person to help address that issue.
I
So
think it would help, from what I've heard and what's been shared with us too, it would help the teachers in terms of knocking out, from 4 environments down to potentially, 1 or 2, depending on how some of those things look too. I sense it would be a little bit of a relief that way.
It'd be nice to have more information on the vaccine, right? First, I mean, we need a lot more information about Alan's questions earlier with the vaccine and the timing and things like that before that.
and we want those trend lines to continue in the direction where they were.
And how fast it's going, could be going fast. Another question is, I keep coming back to vaccines, and maybe that's just because that's our only hope, and I'm hanging on to it. But as a district, are we going to have, what's our position going to be on encouraging or requiring our staff to be vaccinated, encouraging or requiring our students to be vaccinated? I'm not pushing either of those, but I just think as a district, we're going to have to decide.
Currently,
legal opinion would be that you cannot require.
Is that Wisconsin state law or is that federal? Because I heard in Minnesota that the school districts are considering requiring it.
I'd have to go back and look at some notes that I have. I'll share that out with the board. We got a legal update on that topic right before break, and I'll dig that out.
We'll probably run into that now
We can't require-
students maybe not having a polio vaccine or something like that, and we don't restrict them from accessing the school. We probably don't restrict if a teacher, for instance, doesn't have a vaccine. We probably don't restrict their access to work. So I would think it's probably going to fall in the same line. But the requirement, I'd be interested in hear about if there's a requirement, if we can require or not require. I tend to think we can.
From AZ on this too, just to get informed about the possible scenarios. If 99% of our population in schools are vaccinated, what's the risk? What if it's 70% or 60%?
Yeah.
Where does that really change for
The herd,
for the population?
I think it would be wise for us to understand the legal issues connected to this. So how about if we use that as a proposed or suggested item for a future meeting at a time when administration is prepared and thinks it's the right time to bring it back to us?
Good idea.
For an update and for conversation.
I can just tell you, for admission to a Minnesota college, you have to submit your vaccination records.
Yeah.
It's your high school transcript and your vaccination records are required. And it'll hold up your admission decision if you haven't submitted.
For state schools and private? I know it's true for private schools, but they have more leeway than state schools.
But I don't know, but I know in state schools, and I know at Augsburg, we rolled it up even for grad students. If they haven't submitted an immunization record, we can't process their application. So
That was true, at least in Oregon, that was true too. My daughter's a grad student there.
So that's why
At a state school.
it might be state law in there, it might be things about it. I'm not pushing to require it, I'm just thinking, in it, can we even ask people if they've been vaccinated?
Yeah,
Is
it's a
that legal
discussion
to
to have.
ask them if they've been vaccinated, so that we would know in our students?
I do have one thing to say that I am here and I am participating in this meeting. We can put the vaccination question, we can put that on the personnel committee agenda,
There you go.
and we could talk about that in the personnel committee before we bring it to the full board, if that would be okay.
You know, if it's-
We can do that. That works particularly well for our employees. It's a different issue for students. So, but that's a good suggestion.
Yes.
Anything else on this? So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. I'm going to take a roll call. Cindy, I'll start with you.
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Mike, I'm voting yes. Alan?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
The motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. Good conversation about that. All right, at this point, we have had extensive conversation about the revision to our board policies related to graduation requirements as well as the rule. It is now before the board for a second reading. At this point, do we have a motion to approve the second reading of revisions to policy 345.6, graduation requirements, as well as the second reading of revision to policy 345.6, the rule?
So moved.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Mike, for the second. Additional questions or comments? We've talked about this a lot over years. Kit is ready to have this done.
The thoughtfulness, I just want to say the thoughtfulness of of Kit and the staff and how this was brought forward and communicated and planned was super impressive. Just so.
I would like to point out, though, that I think it has changed over time. I think that now the reason why we're able to pass it is I think we have more clarity. We have much more specificity about what the goals are and what the process is going to be, which is why I think this is the right time. All right, we have a motion that's been moved and seconded and going to take a roll call vote. Cindy?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Mike?
Yep.
I'm saying yes. Alan?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
The motion is carried. All right. Kit, you've got it. Go forward. Do well with it. All right, we already have one item for a future meeting agenda, and I want to be clear, this will come before the board at a time when administration thinks it's the right time, when we have enough information to have a good conversation. It's not necessarily next Monday. Are there other things that we should be talking about?
One thing we talked about discussing in the January meeting was the way money works in the pre-K program for both kids.
That's true. We have that down. Do we want that to go first to F&F, or should it be a full board presentation? Start
With
first in
F&F,
F&F,
I
and then it
think so.
can come and be done at a full board meeting. That makes sense. And again, that could be at a time when it works well in the near future on an F&F agenda. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Chad and Mike? Okay. Other things?
The next item I had was the annual meeting for the WASB, as far as some resolutions out there. Aaron had sent, the final ones are here. I will be the appointee. That is on the date on that's the 16th.
Historically, what we've done is on the meeting prior, so at the regular board meeting in January, the board will vote to empower you to vote in the best interest of the school district.
Okay.
And we can have conversation about specific resolutions. It's also true that Jamie knows more about this than any of the rest of us do, and so he can provide some guidance for that.
Talk with Jamie about that.
So, are there other things? Okay, then we are going to schedule meetings. The next Personnel Committee will meet Monday, January 11th at 5:30. Educational Program will meet Monday, January 11th at 6 o'clock. There will be a special board meeting on Monday, January 11th at 6:30. Finance and Facilities will meet Monday, January 18th at 6. The next regular board meeting will be Monday, January 18th, starting at 6:30. All of those meetings will be here, and with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and good night. Have fun swimming.
Thank you.
Yeah.